Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on the state of the Malazan Empire. And this is my second attempt at filming this video. I started like half an hour ago, and after 10 minutes it started raining a ton, so I wasn't, I checked the footage, it's not exactly usable, so I'm gonna try this again. We're here to talk about The Crippled God, Book 2. I read the entirety today because it's only 3 chapters, and here's what we have to talk about. Let's get this started. Cheers. So yeah, I said before that The Crippled God has a different structure from the other Malazan books. It is not just like 4 books with usually 6 chapters. They're all over the place. And book 2 has 3 chapters, as has book 3, whereas book 1 had 4 chapters. So in order to make this sort of consistent and have like not rather short videos or whatever, I decided to go through all 3 because they're rather short chapters today. And try and see if we can actually find some kind of overarching theme throughout this whole book. Well, we'll see. So one thing that we learn here is like this is sort of the last. It feels like it is the last like deep breath before the final like conflict really starts, which we find out at the end, because in the last of those 3 chapters we finally have an open discussion, or more or less open discussion, on what is going on, what's going to be the end of the story, that it's going to be a war against the Four Sail to free the heart of the Crippled God. And all the allies or supposed allies are gathered once again. Everyone is back in the fold, so to speak, and then everyone decides to together go it and do that thing. Now, well, let's start with the happenings in Carcanas, which are not that many. Like, I mean, we have the whole argument with Sanderlath, Drew Corlett, not wanting to be Queen of High House Dark, which I still don't like. I mean, I feel we need to talk about that later on when we know more about it than right now, and continue to look more at the discussion at the shore. There's 2 things going on there, right? There is the argument with between Yen and Derek and Captain Pithy about the question what could make the Lethery and Non-Shake fight there until the end, whether it's saving the world or whether it's greed, and apparently greed is a very powerful motivator. And Captain Pithy then explains why she became a thief and a criminal. And this is an interesting thing to talk about, because what she says there is that basically the criminal, a criminal expects the world to betray him or take advantage of him or her or them, and just decides to do it before the world does it to them. And while this may strictly be true for criminals, I feel at this point is very much something that goes beyond that, right? It's like the way we have made our societies very much about the individual, like making an individualistic society that is nevertheless ruled by the competitiveness that is part of capitalism, which, it is. It very much means that we try to get the biggest advantage all the time by bending the rules as much as possible and so forth, or maybe breaking the rules. So this mindset of expecting the world to betray us and trying to do it before anyone else can do it to us is something that is very much enforced or encouraged by the society we live in. And since we have spoken about that before, the Lethery society is very close in that regard to what we have in at least a Western consumer capitalist world. I feel it's important to understand that mindset while she's talking about the criminals, she's very much talking about each and every one of us, because we're all at least tempted to go that route, to expect the world to betray us, because that's what happens in the world. When we look at nowadays how like international corporations and so forth bend and evade rules and almost behave criminally or openly behave criminally, the idea of taking advantage of everyone else is built into the society we live in, or built in this case, into the society of the Lethery. And I feel that's an important aspect of what she says there, and one that we should be aware of, because once again, while this may be a statement about Letherus and about Lethery, it is very much also something that we can take away from it. And like when we re-examine our own attitude towards respecting the written and unwritten rules about making deals with other people and so forth, how much we as people also try to get the better of everyone else, and how much our society has been like built up like that we always expect the worst from everyone else, maybe except our personal like close friends, but in general, the tendency to expect the state, big corporations, businesses, and so forth to fuck us over is very deeply ingrained in our society these days. And I feel that's something that is important to keep in mind, that this is not just those evil criminals down there. No, that's all of us, basically. Now, the next thing I feel is interesting to look at is the conversation, or more like the inner monologue of Ian Tovis, when she's thinking about the faith of the sheikh, them worshipping the worship of the sheikh of the shore, and the idea that the shore being impersonal, being more of an idea and not so much of a person, like personal god, or a god that is a person, is somehow better than worshipping a person, or a god with a personality, because it's more, I don't know, it is more abstract. It seems less whimsical, less prone to weird ideas and so forth, because it is that like always persisting idea. Now that is obviously a wrong idea, and it's something that Jan Tovis kind of realizes there. And we see that obviously when we look at like our world, we have replaced, like in a lot of cases, we have replaced or moved or shifted our faith and our belief from a deity of whatever stripe towards more abstract ideas or words or whatever, whether that is the idea of wealth, of prosperity, of justice, of the list goes on and on and on, right? We have done that a lot as well, and it is important to recognize, I feel, that while those things may not be called religion as such, they fulfill a similar role. It's something that we use to align our lives towards, right? And worship can take all kinds of forms, and I'm no different from anyone else. I just don't go with like actual religious belief. That's just something I suck at. But I obviously also have abstract things that I maybe worship, or at least use use to align my actions according to those things. And it's important to see that in the end is no better or worse than belief or faith in a person, or like an individual god. Because the danger is, and this is sort of where it becomes interesting, is abstract ideas, maybe even more than gods within the Malazan universe, are created and interpreted by us humans, or like humans, once again, like people, by people, right? So if we believe in justice, and I'm going to use that to shift over to the four-color sail, obviously. If we believe in justice, it's us who have the final say on what justice means and what is just and what is not just. And this is an important thing there, because we, as I guess most of us human readers reading that, realize that the type of justice that the four-color sail espouse is quite different from what we would call everyday justice, right? I mean, in the end, we could argue that for all the things that we as humans have done to the world, we deserve to die, and so forth. Sure, we can do that, but that's not usually what we call justice. So what we see there is that the word, the idea of justice, has been corrupted, or has been at least shifted and redefined according to motivations that are wholly part of the personality of the four-color sail, and not some. They're not a objective. Like, the idea of justice is not an objective idea. It is a subjective one, according to, in this case, the four-color sail. So in the end, worshipping an abstract idea is at least as problematic as worshipping a god, because abstract ideas are even more dependent on our personal interpretation. And we see that like very much with the four-color sail, right? They worship justice, and the way they are described is usually at least the ones that have been doing it for a long time, like Sister Reverence, whom we meet here for the first time. We have Calm, who has lost all her hair because of that long imprisonment. You have Reverence with that gouged out eye and half collapsed face, and the limp because of all these battles that she, right? All of these things. And what we see there is that it basically, her pursuit of her personal idea of justice has corrupted herself and deformed herself at least as much as the idea of justice she is pursuing has been deformed by her as well, right? So we see that there is almost like a visible, in a visible way, we see how that relation between the god, or in this case the abstract idea, and the worshipper has corrupted both sides, right? Now let's stay a bit on that subject more, and that is the big question that these chapters overall ask, at least like the chapter 5 and chapter 6 mostly ask, in a way, or mostly like portray, and that is the idea of like how we use ideas, actually, or just how we justify extermination, right? Because we have, during those chapters, we have several exterminations, some ongoing and some that have already happened. And you could read all of those, the killing of the Imas by humans, the killing of animals by Imas and or humans, and obviously the killing of humans, in that case the Barghast, by Imas, or the killing of humans in Kalance by the four-color sail. All of those are basically exterminations. And the interesting thing there is that you can look, when you go back to things that we've seen in Memories of Ice, you look at those things and you see that, like, the idea, like that eternal war is part of nature in general. But what we as humans, or as people, as sentient people, whether it's Imas or humans or four-color sail, do is we cloak that, or yeah, we cloak that like innate natural fight for superiority. We cloak that and use artificial abstract words like yeah, justice or purity or whatever. We justify that with some kind of moral overlay that is in the end just something to make us feel better when we realize that we have just used our superior strength to annihilate something else, something that might have actually been beautiful. Or we come in and say like we kill, or like you know you see with the Foraker Last Sale, they go and call killing all the humans for destroying the land. They call that justice. But in the end, are they that much better than all the humans killing the killing animals or killing the Imas and calling it whatever they call it, probably also justice? Or not, because in the end it's just once again using their superior strength and power to assert dominance in a way. And what we see here is, and I feel it's especially important within the Foraker Last Sale, what we see there is they, with their like also huge emphasis on purity. You have the pure Foraker Last Sale, you have the watered, like watered with like mixed blood, and then you have the shriven who are just the slaves. You look at that, and maybe it's something that I personally, because I live here in Germany, I'm like, that sounds super fucking racist right there. This is as close to having a master race and mixed and so forth. This is brutal. This is an interesting thing to combine these things like purity and justice and so forth, and combine them basically what would boil down to genetics. That's racist in the end. And yeah, when you look at how the Foraker Last Sale behave, they're close to that now. We see in the Foraker Last Sale how fucking inhuman and morally reprehensible that kind of behavior is. But you should also, you know, be clear that this is absolutely morally reprehensible to do as humans in our world, right? Yeah, just one of those things that you know, I found kind of interesting there. All right. What else did we talk about? Right, the last chapter. It's very interesting that we have like the whole parley between the all the different armies and allies. We have all of that from Aaronic's perspective, which is more or less still an outsider perspective. I feel that's something that we should like is interesting to look at, especially when it comes to the conflict of within the Grey Helms. Paris Grey Helms with Krukava and Tanakalian, the conflict between Krukava and the adjunct about like maybe injured pride in a way, or assailed honor in a way. I feel that's an interesting thing to look at, and we'll probably have to look more at it later on when we have like come back again to Tanakalian as a viewpoint character and see how he reflects on all of that. So yeah, that I found that one really interesting. Also, the way that we see, you know, Bottle coming back and Ruth and God coming back and all of that, and I feel this is like a really interesting aspect here with when the Unbound, whom we met as absolute bastards, right? This is like once again this whole idea of how with knowing more, how by knowing more about motives and stuff, suddenly characters change. When we look at back at what the Unbound did as late as in the Bone Hunters, right? When they killed all these other when they killed Hiboric and abducted Felicine Younger. all the way back. Like that's like 3 books, 4 books ago. They were absolute fucking bastards, and now they're suddenly our allies, or at least allies of the Bone Hunters. And what we once again see here is like how much of this is also built on faith, because it's like up until the point when the 5 Unbound show up with Masan Gilani at the tent of the adjunct. Apparently it's clear that the adjunct was not aware of whether she was still in time or so forth. So she's doing all of this just because she feels it's the right thing to do. Which, once again, the idea of faith, which is difficult to explain, to make it, to make it easy. Faith is difficult to explain. One more thing we need to talk about before we end this for today, I feel, is Captain Blizdig, once again. And the moment he realizes that the Bone Hunters are most likely destined to just die, but for a just cause, and he just doesn't want to do that. And he openly defies the adjunct, but the adjunct denies him his request to be removed from office and all that. She just doesn't accept that. And we still need to talk more about her treatment of Blizdig later on, but I feel when you go through all of that and you combine the things happening here, we see us seeing them from the outside. When you combine that with what they saw yesterday in chapter 4, it is, when we had that long passage of him feeling so inadequate for what he's doing right now and feeling left behind and ruined by all of the stuff that has happened already. So to see how he can snap in that situation, and he has a lot of good arguments here to realize that this is maybe not a good cause, because once again, signing on as a soldier is not necessarily signing on to be thrown away and just go and kill yourself, basically, for something that is only barely recognizable as a cause for you. This is like universal justice, or maybe not justice, but universal moral rightness in a way, is very, very different from actual tangible rightness or justice or just causes, in a way where you see your people directly profiting from it, which brings us basically back to that whole opening where we have the argument between Yedenderic and Pithy, right? When Pithy is saving the world, it's all well and good. It might not actually convince people to fight, because that's not how we are wired at this point, because our society has built us and has turned us into people who are not looking for the universal good, but looking for the individual personal good. So basically, in the end, Blizdig and Pithy, or at least not Pithy herself, but the people that she's speaking for, are in the same situation, which once again works well with Stephen Erickson having said that he likes these kind of elliptical writings where he ends up at the beginning and so forth. Anyway, I feel that's sort of enough for today. I'll talk to you tomorrow about book 3, I guess. Until then, have a great Wednesday. Cheers.